Hello Internet. It's another beautiful day. Just finishing up a run. Thought I'd go for a quick walk through the woods here and record a vlog. Today I want to talk about healing, because that's a topic that's been on my mind a lot lately as I think about sort of how do we respond to the sort of impossible pressures of, living in this capitalist society. I really think that we need to learn how to heal if we're going to stand a chance at kind of making it as a species, humanity. And I've been thinking a lot about sort of the way that emotional wounds, like trauma, can, it's almost like if your emotional wounds aren't treated, it's almost like analogous to getting an infection with a physical wound, where if you don't, basically get emotional attention, emotional support, in the kind that you're needing, treatment for an emotional wound when you have something traumatic happen to you, then it's almost as though that wound gets infected, because it has this sort of ongoing effect on your life. And in this case, it's not through bacteria or whatever are kind of breeding in an infection, pathogens. It's more like your brain gets wired up in a certain way that then reinforces pathways that keep sort of sending you back into this harm, and into this triggered response. And I think that our society has just kind of, it's built on systemic trauma to the point where I'm not even sure if it's possible to live in our society without receiving some kind of trauma, right? We put this into our very school systems through the use of shame, with grading and this sort of very hierarchical approach to sorting people into A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's or whatever. And I think the effects of everyone on Earth having some kind of sort of emotional wound at some point in their life, and then not, and these don't all come from the education system. There's lots of sources of emotional wounds. It's a rough world out there. And then having so many of us not get the sort of emotional, first aid that we're needing in those moments, or ongoing treatment as it might be depending on the wound, the traumatic event. I think the implications of how that shapes our interactions are really profound, and something that I would love to see more exploration in and kind of unpacking, because I have just recently kind of started to learn how to heal from my trauma, and I have noticed such a big difference in my personal life and in my ability to interact with a broader expression of responses, because I'm no longer constantly being thrust back into that kind of traumatic state as often. Not that I'm never there. I am a frequent visitor of the past traumatic memories, but I have learned a little bit more about kind of what to do when that happens and how to care for myself when that happens, and I've sort of begun to rewire my brain in ways that I don't get thrust into those situations as often. And gosh, it's nice. I like it. I like not being constantly triggered 100% of the time. That shit was exhausting. What was I gonna say? I feel like there was more I was gonna say in this video. I think, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about the way that shame can kind of shut us down, right? Because we have, when I think about, a little bit of backing up here. I talked about healing, want more opportunities for healing. Now let's look at okay, so how do we heal, right? And try to just keep an open mind as we sort of explore different strategies, and not treating things as successes or failures, just as data points, being okay, so what about, what about talking about our feelings and needs? Does that help us heal? Okay. What about arguing with strangers on the internet? Does that help us heal? And just trying to get kind of a clearer understanding of what are the actions that we can take to help us move towards healing. And that's something that, I don't have all the answers. I have a few ideas. I have found a lot of value in a lot of different approaches, nonviolent communication, internal child work, inner child work, internal family systems, polyvagal theory. I've seen a lot of different approaches, and I think that there's a lot more out there, and that they can all be kind of integrated together, and I'm really curious about learning more about all the different approaches that exist. And I would encourage you to get curious about the things in your own life that you have experienced healing from. I know that I was listening to a podcast recently called Fucking Cancelled, with Jay and Clementine as the hosts. Clementine's last name I think is Morgan. I don't know Jay's offhand, but anyways, they talk about their perspective on sort of online internet shaming culture as leftists who have gone through 12-step programs, as recovering addicts. And I found a lot of insight into the ways that they've talked about seeing healing happen and feeling healing happen for them, and being able to break these cycles of harm, and what has helped them achieve that and what has not helped them achieve that. And I highly recommend the podcast. If you haven't listened to it yet, I would recommend you check it out. And I think that something that they talk about, and something that I have noticed as well, is how shame is just not very effective as a tool for changing people's behavior, and that you really, if you want to actually help people be accountable in tangibly changing their behavior, instead of just sort of having this more reactionary, performative, saying the right things so that you get out of trouble kind of. If you actually want to hold people accountable for that deeper change, you really need someone to be with them and to be able to hold them in a non-judgmental way. That is how that change really happens, or how they have seen it happen. and how I have also seen it happen in my personal life. And in a way that's kind of like what therapists do, or one of the sources of that kind of space to do that processing work is therapy, which is why I think therapy is great and everyone should do it. There I go, telling people what they should do. You do what you want. You don't have to go to therapy. I just hope that you're getting your emotional needs met in some way that works for you. Lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, because shame, so when we try to rely on shame, I think that we just make people not want to touch the topic, like, at all. And that's why we end up with, like, so many people that are really uncomfortable talking about these systems of oppression that we live within, is because, like, their experience is that talking about these things has resulted in shame. So they're like, well, you know, not them consciously, but their nervous systems learn, like, oh, well, I shouldn't do that because that's not good. I don't like that. That's dangerous for me emotionally. You know, being afraid of being shamed or exiled, and then the systems perpetuate because we're not able to have these dialogues that can, you know, peel these anger onions and get into sort of the deeper layers and communicate the hurt that each of us are feeling and the needs that are not being met. So I think that one of the hopeful things for me in learning about all this has been seeing that, oh, when you do that healing work, you can kind of start to break up this chain of harm, of intergenerational harm that's being passed down over years and years and years. And that just feels really hopeful to me. Like, oh, we can heal. It doesn't always have to be this hard. And even if it is really hard for a lot of people right now, that maybe there can be a gentler future, and a future where we're more able to hold each other with care. And that's just been a really sweet vision for me to sit with. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Thanks for listening, and have a lovely day.